Hi everyone, this is Agni again, and I'm back with the next version of the Breach Ready Dialogues. And today my guest is a researcher, very different from the people we've been meeting. She is one of the finest working at MIT Sloan, and she's researching on cybersecurity. Please welcome. Go ahead. Could you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Agni. Yes, I'm Dr. Keri Pearlson. I'm currently a principal research scientist at MIT Sloan. I work on problems that have to do with the management, the governance, the security, and the strategy and the organizational decisions around security and resilience. I actually like to talk about it as cyber resilience rather than cybersecurity. And I've looked at a number of different projects over the course of my 10 years, almost 10 years. It's almost 9 years at MIT so far. Previous to MIT, I've held a number of different jobs. I've been a CIO. I've designed and delivered executive education programs in the IT space, in the cybersecurity space, in the analytics space. I've developed companies and sold them. I've been an entrepreneur. I started my career as a data analyst and a information systems analyst at an aerospace company. So I've had a number of jobs over my career. I've seen a lot of things, and I'm delighted to be here today, Agni, to talk about my cybersecurity work at MIT. So thank you for inviting me.
No, I'm actually fascinated by the work that you're doing, and let me be very honest that for many of us who've been in cybersecurity for a long time, meeting someone who's doing research on cybersecurity and prefers to focus on cyber resilience is not every day. It's rare because everyone we meet is focused on how do we stop the bad guys. And then I met someone a few days ago and she said, it seems like everybody's chasing the mouse, while all that you need to do is stand in front of the refrigerator where the cheese is. I think she meant the same thing, but tell me more about your research. What is it that you're doing and how is it progressing?
I love your story. The bad guys, the malicious actors, they're going to come to us whether we hold the cheese or whether we don't hold the cheese, especially as we see these new technologies that increase their ability to find the cheese, if you will, all the bots they can create and using tools, whether it's AI or just regular old IT tools to find the vulnerabilities that they need to find in our systems. My interest is primarily in what I call cyber resilience. I think pretty much what you were just saying really fits. We spend a lot of money building our levels of defense, and building levels of defense in depth, that's our strategy for keeping the bad guys out. And every time we find a new vulnerability or a new risk, we being the general ecosystem of cybersecurity professionals, come up with a new level, a new tool, a new way to stop that particular vulnerability or risk from potentially hurting our companies. And to me, that's really important. We have to do that, and it's important work, and I'm really glad there are people focused on that work. But I like to talk about changing our mindset. Instead of just focusing on protection, which is keeping the bad guys out, I think we need at the senior level and at the board level, I do a lot of research in the board level, to think about resilience, which is what do we do, assuming that we have an incident, assuming we have an event, what can we do now before we have that event so that in the event, we have already prepared ourselves. And to me, that is that we do protection. That's a piece of that. We protect as much as we can so that we rarely have the damage. And if we have the damage, it's as minimal as it can be. And that's things like backing up our technologies and putting in identity and access management, using zero trust architectures, doing penetration testing, doing all sorts of offensive types of security activities. But it's more than that. To me, it's about thinking about our people, and doing things so that our people can help us be resilient. And it's about our processes, thinking about our processes from the perspective of which of our processes are critical and which of our processes, what part of our processes could we prioritize so that we offer a minimum level of service should there be an incident. Our customers aren't as affected by it. It's about practicing. It's about taking the unknown and saying, we don't know what's going to happen, but what's critical from our organization so that we can get back up to an operational level as quickly as possible. So to me, resilience is a different mindset. It's thinking, let's assume for a moment we might have an incident. What in our organization can we do now so that we have as little damage, as little financial hit, as little operational hit, as little reputational hit, and any other area where we would see damage as possible. And then we do it. So it's really a way to manage the unknown, things we can't really quantify right now because we don't know where those things are coming from. So let me stop there for just a minute and maybe we can talk a little bit about your perspective on resilience.
Oh, yes. While you were speaking, I was thinking this is so like the theme that I go around talking, but there's something very interesting in what you said. And that was about processes, and I realized, when I was a CISO earlier in my life, one of the things I walked across to somebody on one fine morning, and he put his hand around my shoulder and he said, one of the leaders, that is, he said, "How secure are we?" And I realized that was probably the most difficult question I would ever encounter. And though I was able to walk away that day by simply telling him that I can give you in percentages, but tell me what you really need to know, where are you going, then I can tell you how secure you are there. So I averted that day, but it gave me an awakening that's probably the most difficult question to answer, because we need to be, if we are not prepared for the next breach, then we really can't do anything. And that changed my perspective of board investment into cybersecurity. I realized that if the board starts giving money to me as a CISO and expects me to go and shield everybody else, it's not making sense, because the board is also giving money to someone else to lead a digital initiative whose initiative is not connected to my security program. So all that I recommended them was that we should have three things to focus on at a board level. One, make sure that everybody who comes to you for a digital initiative, whether he's trying to create a digital warehouse in the factory by connecting data from older machines and creating a new data warehouse which can be leveraged for higher innovation, business growth, etc., or somebody is trying to build a new ERP component of whatever that they want. They're digitalizing gate entries. They're putting innovation in how goods are transferred, supply chain. It doesn't really matter. As long as the board says, you've come to me with a request, tell me, is digital resilience built in? And that's a difficult question to answer again. So I said, okay, you can then break it down to two questions. Focus on two parameters, indicators. The first indicator is how much, and this is what exactly you said too, how much of material impact or financial losses or reputational loss are we willing to accept for the digital innovation to take shape? Because it will take time to take shape. And until that time, until it becomes completely resilient, how much are we willing to accept? Number one. Number two, and this is also what you said, is we should try and keep as much business operations on during a disruption as much as we can. So the focus is on how much of our businesses will remain unaffected by a cyber attack if we are focusing on a digital innovation. And to do that, they have just three questions that they should be asking the next level of leadership, whoever has come with a proposal. Number one, given your digital proposal, what are the chances that we can anticipate the next attack? Given all our investment. Now you may say 0, or you may say 100, you may say 50, it's okay. Start with a number. Next, if we can anticipate that much, how much of it can we contain and keep under control if there is a cyber attack? And number 3, if those numbers are not as good as we expect, because it has to be correlated to the numbers that we are looking for in terms of material impact and in terms of viable digital business, how much investment is needed to improve them to meet the expectation of your business growth? And that's it. Rest of it, people below will figure it out. Now, whether they need an EDR, they need whatever thing that they need, a security tool, or they need to change the processes. That's why I found your comment on processes very important, because there are a lot of processes in an organization which are insecure by themselves. We have retained processes from old times, and we have not upgraded them in the digital world. So that's been my experience on cyber resilience. I feel resilience has to be the ability to withstand a cyber attack. And that is really cyber resilience. How can you withstand and continue doing what you're doing? And probably win from there. Because I remember I saw a video by somebody, and he was showing a graph, and that was about operational resilience, not digital resilience. And he said that there are 3 stages after an operational disruption. The first stage is that you try and come back to as close as to what was earlier the old normal. And then you would not be able to, and we saw that during COVID, right? That we were not able to go back to the old normal. Then he said, then it will create a new normal, that the new normal might be higher, giving benefits, or lower, losing something. That could be the future. The point is, if you have thought about this earlier, which goes to your point that you were making, if you think about it from before the attack happens, then you probably would be doing it with benefits, which means you would be at a new normal, which would be better than the older normal. What do you think about that?
So I view resilience a little bit differently than you do. And I think thinking about digital resilience is a little bit too narrow. I like the operational and organizational resilience idea, because today everything's digital, but not everything in the past was. And as you said, we have processes that might still be operating in a less high level of digital capacity. And as we bring in AI and new tools, we're changing processes and the way that we do business all the time. So to me, cyber resilience means that we can, we've thought about and anticipated the impact a cyber incident might have on our organization. And we've put things in place so that we can come back at least as good, if not better. So let me dive another level down. First of all, I've written a lot about this at Harvard Business Review. So if some of your listeners are interested, they can do a Google search on my name, Keri Pearlson, and find some of the articles at Harvard Business Review on how I define resilience. One of the tools that I like to talk about with the board is what I call a balanced scorecard for cyber resilience. And it asks similar questions to what you just described. One of the questions is, the main question is to look at, it's based on this work done by some colleagues at Harvard Business Review many years ago, which was a balanced scorecard for financial reporting. So I knew that work, and I adapted that work to the cyber world, where I said, let's take a look at the key components that of our operational environment, which are typically things like our people, our technology, our supply chain. Maybe there's a piece of, there's certainly financial health. There's a piece of regulation and compliance. And let's ask, as a board member, let me ask my operating managers, what do you see as the biggest risk, and what are we doing about it? What is the biggest risk from a cyber incident, and what are we doing about it? So that kind of speaks to your point of, where are we with our processes, and what's the minimum amount of risk we're willing to, or the maximum amount of risk we're willing to accept. Except it's a little bit more pointed, because I'm not sure our operational managers think about risk quite the same way that the board does. That's the whole reason for the board. They got an oversight function. And so when the board says, what's the biggest risk to our company from, say, our technology, should there be a cyber incident, then that speaks to something our technology leaders are very comfortable with. That speaks to things like backups, and it speaks to things like new tools in place that help us recover. It speaks to things like you were mentioning about building in resilience to the technology. But we ask the question a little differently, and we say, what's the biggest risk? Why do you think it's the risk? What's the magnitude of the risk? And then let's discuss what it is you've put in place to mitigate that risk. Do we have insurance to cover it? Do we have backup systems, which also, by the way, in a cyber incident are highly suspect, because if something's been in your system for a long time, it's probably in your backup systems also. So what are we doing about the risk? And then practicing it. And that's another key piece of resilience. I talk a lot about what we call, I'm sure your listeners are familiar with, tabletop exercises and fire drills. We do that a lot with our technology. We try our backups to make sure they're fail safe, and we know how to move to a backup system. But do we do that with our processes? Do we do that with our people? Do we do that with our relationships with our customers? So when we start to think more broadly about tabletop exercises and fire drills, one way to be resilient is to practice. Put yourself in a situation, hypothetically, hopefully, of a cyber incident, and go through what you would do about it, and actually do it if you can. The talk about it is really good, but doing it is really important. You gave the analogy earlier of the person at the refrigerator with the cheese to attract the mice. I give the example of, with resilience of, the more we talk about it, it's like going to the gym. You can join a gym, but that's not going to give you muscles. If you actually go to the gym and work out and practice, i.e., work your muscles, then when the time comes and you need your muscles, you will have them. And I think that same analogy applies with resilience. One of the key ways to be resilient is to practice the backup, practice the comeback, and not just from a technology perspective, but have a board tabletop exercise where the board talks about what they would do, have a C-level or an executive team tabletop, and not just once, maybe regularly, maybe every 6 months, maybe more often than that, if you really want to build those muscles to a strong level of competence, so that you don't know exactly what the situation's going to be like when you actually have a cyber incident. But you know that you're going to need to call on vendors. Some of your vendors, are they available? If a cyber incident happens to your whole sector, are you going to be the one that doesn't get the vendor support that you need? If you need to know who your local law enforcement people are that might help you with a cyber incident, have you called them before? Let's not wait until there's an incident to figure out if we have all of these things in place. That's what I mean by building your resiliency muscles, is to really practice and think about those things in a tabletop exercise. So putting together a balanced scorecard of cyber resilience, where you identify the key risks, your operating managers identify the key risks and what they're doing about it, and doing things like building tabletop exercises or some other kind of exercises so you build those resiliency muscles, are two really important factors, I think, for resilience thinking. And neither of those really come in when you do prevention thinking. Prevention is important. I'm not minimizing protection. I'm just saying those are two examples of things that wouldn't come up in a discussion of what protections should we put in place.
No, I agree with you. I think I was saying the same thing. Maybe I articulated it differently, but the structure that I talked about, the three questions that the operational people should really focus on is, given our current investments, how much can we anticipate the next attack? Now that has a few components in it. How do you anticipate an attack? The good news is there's enough research available. CISA, for example, has on their websites a list of known attackers and their attack types. MITRE, for example, has got a whole plethora, and now version 18 has come out, where they have gone into more finer ways of defining how attacks happen. if we are able to consume that information, that intelligence, and then say, okay, given our infrastructure, given our current state, possibly we could get impacted if we don't defend these, if we don't change these procedures or these processes that we have. And I'll give you a very simple example. The process could be as simple as onboarding a new vendor. Now, current processes may need that they need to follow, go somewhere, get an ID and come on, and get registered through a particular process. But the new process would say that you can use passwordless cryptographic authentication, which is available by signing off on this website, given you get this identity from your company. We are going to allow you to download a specific authentication mechanism, which is only tied to one of your machines. And you don't need any other approvals from us anymore. And you'd only be able to get 4 of them because only 4 have been allocated to your company, to these named individuals. Now, if you're able to change this, bring in this level of granularity into your operational processes, it means you are anticipating that possibly a valid account of a supplier can be misused, and then someone can navigate. If you have thought ahead in advance, you could even think of granularly microsegmenting your organization, which means now you have a different box for suppliers, you have a different box for critical assets, you have a different box for senior leadership, you have a different box, you have boxes everywhere, so that even if there's a cyber attack tomorrow in the most freely available one, the other boxes continue to operate the way they were supposed to operate. So that was where I was getting to. And then you also have the ability to contain, which means, like you said, prevention is a very important task. So if there were to be a cyber attack tomorrow, you have your detection tools, you'd be able to detect an attack, you'd be able to contain the attack and keep it limited to where it happened. And that means your impact is now reduced to 1 or 2% of what the enterprise is. We hear all this time in the news, there has been an unprecedented cyber attack, and in order to save the company from these kind of situations, it is an unprecedented cyber attack, so we shut down the operations. You don't need to do that anymore if you are well prepared. So I think what you and I are saying are probably the same thing, but let me ask you this. You talked a lot about people and resilience of them, and then you talked about processes as well. What do you think would be a good program if someone were to think about how do we build resilience in people?
I'm so glad you asked that. I love to talk about the people side of resilience. Some of my work is what I call building a culture of cybersecurity. And I think that's another really important component of a resiliency plan. When I talk about building a culture of cybersecurity, I talk about thinking about the values, attitudes, and beliefs that we instill in our people so that they do the right behaviors that we want. If you think about it, most organizations do a lot of training. I don't know of an organization today that doesn't make people who join the company go through some sort of cyber training at the beginning of their onboarding process. And usually in that training, we tell people guardrails. You got to change your password. You're going to have to take this course every 6 months or every year. These are the kind of things we want to see you do. They're told that in the first week or month of their employment, and think about all the things you're learning in your first week or month of your employment. How much of that's really going to stick? And then we give them training once a year, and most people do their training online while they're doing words with friends or texting their friends or something else on their phone, because the training is usually compliance-based, and it's maybe interesting, maybe not. And it's just a checkbox. And when it's a checkbox, it doesn't mean very much. It has very little impact on our thinking about it. The other tool that a lot of organizations use are awareness campaigns. We're now in November. It was October. October is Cybersecurity Month, and everybody's talking cybersecurity. And every organization I know sends out at least one email that says something like, oh, by the way, it's Cybersecurity Month. here's how you can recognize a phishing email today, or, don't forget to change your password this month, or whatever else they might want to tell you. It's awareness. Maybe they have things on the walls that say, the data is yours and mine, so let's make sure we keep it all protected. They have awareness campaigns. Again, really important to remind people of things, but not very motivating to change behaviors. So when we talk about the people side of the equation, I like to talk about building a culture of cybersecurity. What do I mean by that? Well, if we think about it, and we think about what makes you want to do something, you do the activities you do because they're valuable to you, or because you like doing them, or because your boss told you it's important and you want to please your boss. I mean, there's some motivation, there's some emotional motivation behind why you do what you do. There's a lot of things you could do, and you can't do everything. So you pick and choose what you need to do, and you do for some reason. Not just because it was a training program. The training program might make you aware of what to do, and it maybe give you some indication of what your company thinks is important. But you do it because you feel you're supposed to do it, and you want to please. You want to have a check the box off, or some other motivation. And it's that motivation that drives behavior. So once we realize that there's this other motivation that drives behavior, then if we back up, there's a number of other things we could do besides a training program. For example, in one company that I studied, they don't want people to click on phishing emails. Nobody wants to click on phishing emails. But in this company, they put consequences in. If you click on a phishing email the first time, you have to take a little short course to remind you what a phishing email looks like. And hopefully it's still accurate. Today's world, phishing emails are much more sophisticated. So what you learn might or might not apply, but let's just say that it's a consequence. You have to take a little 5-minute class. It's very disruptive. You're in the middle of doing your work, you click on an email, you have to go and stop and go do this other course. So it's a pain. It causes pain, and it changes our values about clicking on emails. But if you click in this company on a phishing email, the second time you meet with your manager, the third time you meet with HR, the fourth time you get a final warning, and the fifth time you're fired. You could get fired from that company for clicking on an email 5 times, a phishing test 5 times. Now, that doesn't necessarily work in every company. I've shared this example with hundreds of executives, and many of them roll their eyes and go, there's no way we're firing anybody because they click on a phishing email, and that's fine. However, in this company, you can be sure that nobody clicks on a phishing email more than once, a test more than once, maybe twice. You certainly don't click on it 5 times. They learn, because in this company, the consequences drive a belief that this is really important, and therefore that changes their behavior. In another company, a CEO starts his all hands meetings, so everybody in the company, with a cybersecurity story, a cybersecurity moment. He might do things like talk about an article that he just read, or he might talk about an incident that he learned about on the golf course, or he might actually bring up his cybersecurity person to talk about something they're seeing in their environment. But the point is, for zero money, the CEO is sending a message to the company how important cybersecurity is to him. And by the CEO sending that message, spending 5 minutes of their all hands meeting on cybersecurity, he is changing the values, the attitudes, and the beliefs of the people that work for him. And by changing the values and attitudes and beliefs, he's driving a new set of behaviors. So I'd like to write a book about cybersecurity. Can be free. I'm not sure it's totally free, but I mean, this is 5 minutes of the CEO's time and the all hands people's time, but certainly a lot less expensive than designing an expensive awareness campaign to spend 5 minutes. And you know what? Every manager that has people that work for him or her can do that same thing. If you turn around in your next all hands meeting and you say, I saw this cyber girl from MIT talk about how important it was for us to talk about cybersecurity and to bring it into the light, you're going to change the values, attitudes, and beliefs of the people around you. You're going to build a culture of cybersecurity. And that's going to change the behaviors of the people in your organization. So when we talk about the people side, another piece of resilience is to really think about putting in a culture or making explicit a culture of cybersecurity. I have a project right now where I'm trying to articulate a process for evaluating the effectiveness of a cybersecurity culture. I've written a lot about culture. I've written this model of management tools that lead to values, attitudes, and beliefs that lead to behaviors. Now I want to find a way to measure it so that we can help managers figure out where they stand today and give them actionable insights on things that they can do tomorrow to increase the cybersecurity culture of their organization or increase the effectiveness of the culture. But I've given you a couple examples there. I'm sure you and your listeners can think of dozens more examples of things you could do.
Yeah.
Not that change that are training and awareness. Certainly, I wouldn't say firing somebody was training or awareness. Make heroes out of the people that do the good stuff. If you tell somebody in front of an audience how great somebody else is, they feel good about themselves, and the people in the audience say, oh, I want to feel that good about myself. I'm going to try to do those kind of behaviors too. And you're changing the values, attitudes, and beliefs. So there's a lot of things we can learn from my colleagues in the organizational behavior groups about how people are motivated, and positively and negatively, and to use those examples for changing the values, attitudes, and beliefs, which will drive cybersecure behaviors. So let me stop there and see if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I just want to contribute to what you just said. And I fully agree with you. I mean, waiting for the cybersecurity month is the wrong attitude. And let me give you another example. So what we created were called as information security working groups. And these were at CEO plus level. So every department had to have 2 senior members in that group who were supposed to, just like they report all other business progress, they were supposed to report the progress of their business unit for cybersecurity to their manager, a metric. And how do they get that metric? They get that metric from down below. How do they get that metric? They get the metric from down below. So that's how the whole thing progresses, and it goes all the way up to the board, that this is how it works. And all those people who were doing good used to be, like you said, made champions out of. And one of the metrics were how many people were made champions because they did something good. They spread the awareness more or whatever. This is over and above whatever other programs they were having. So I found that model to be equally quite good. In each month, they would have a champion. And then during the cybersecurity month, all they were doing was recognizing everybody who worked very hard during the year. And they were framing up the new program that would come up for the next 12 months. So to me, it was inspirational because it meant that the organization had complete focus on what they need to do about cybersecurity. But let me come to cyber resilience once again, because I think we started about cyber resilience as well, and you talked about the people aspect. There is one thing that I am seeing, and I think you are seeing that too, and I think that's what started this conversation to begin with, and that is the kind of attacks that are happening across the world today. They're focusing more on overwhelming the people. You look at the Qantas breach that happened. Somebody called the help desk posing as a Qantas employee, overwhelmed the help desk analyst into resetting his password. And that's how he got into his valid account, and then he walked in. Something similar happened in Marks and Spencer, something similar happened in JLR, and so forth, to the extent that I think Marks and Spencer, one company, lost a big deal as well. The point is not about who's right and who's wrong. The point is, even the supply chain needs to have a very strong cybersecurity program. And it's not only about the employees, it's more about all those outsourced functions that we have and how good they are, because you think you've trained your people, but if you've not done those two parts, the first part is the foundational microsegmentation thing that I talked about, and the second part is optimizing the processes, and the third thing is making the people, like you said. If we don't cover all these bases, I think I fully agree with you. We are never going to be resilient for the next attack. We're never going to be prepared or be ready for it. And I'm just
let's talk about the supply chain for a minute, because you brought that up. I think that's really important. It's another area that my research team and I have written about and done some work in. So let's talk about supply chain, because of course we see a lot of vulnerabilities introduced into our organizations from the supply chain. And one area that we've been looking at that might be of interest to your listeners is the small and medium enterprise. Many companies, 99% ironically of companies are small and medium enterprises. The big guys are really big, but there are thousands and thousands of small and medium enterprises. And when you start to talk about the outsourcer, their small and medium enterprises are often the people that are the weakest link. It might be a person in those companies, but those companies don't have the resources that larger companies have. And maybe they've outsourced their IT. Maybe they use some sort of cloud application and they assume that their systems are secure because they're using a cloud application. And we know that the cloud applications are more secure than nothing, but most of the cloud providers or the SaaS providers have limited liability on what they will secure for you. So first of all, if you're using any kind of cloud or outsourced software, you want to make sure you understand what part you're responsible for and what part they're responsible for. But more importantly, the research we've been doing looks at how companies can help their suppliers, particularly their smaller suppliers, be more secure. And we've identified dozens of ways that larger companies are helping their small companies be secure. The first thing most companies do, and most cybersecurity leaders think, is, well, we'll give them a checklist. We'll tell them to check off, do an inventory, or we'll ask them if we can come in and do an inventory of what they're doing. And then we'll know what their controls are and how safe they are. And maybe we'll pen test them and we'll see, where the vulnerabilities are. Well, just think about us from the small and medium enterprise perspective. How many of those people can they support? How many checklists can they fill out? How many validations can they let people do? It's very disruptive.
Bandwidth.
They can't do it. They don't have the bandwidth. So while that's the obvious first step for many organizations, it's not useful. It's like training and awareness programs. It's the obvious first thing to do. It's just not enough and maybe not even effective. So one of the things we've seen are companies do things like reach back into their supply chain and offer assistance to their small and medium enterprises. Offer things like your cyber team holding office hours once a week for their people to call in and ask questions. Offering things like you negotiated with your vendors for decent prices for your cybersecurity tools. Offer that blanket of pricing to your smaller and medium enterprise. Offering things even like little tools that you use. One company has a spreadsheet, again, free. It's a spreadsheet. They've already created it, of how they keep track of all the technology in their environment so that if there's a breach, they know it affected them or not. A lot of these breaches affect a particular product. Maybe you don't even have that product, or maybe you do and you don't know you have that product. How would a small and medium enterprise even begin to know if they have that product? So I've seen one company help their vendors catalog what the technologies are in their environment so that they know if there's a breach or not. There are companies like Dragos who have built a whole outreach program for small and medium enterprises to offer these kinds of tools. I believe it's free to help these kinds of companies that don't have the resource of a larger company figure out exactly what it is that they could do for as low cost as possible. So when we talk about the supply chain, it's one thing to say that a vendor might introduce a problem, like an air conditioning vendor, which we've seen multiple times. Even air-gapped systems aren't really air-gapped when it comes to remote maintenance. They're definitely not air-gapped when it's remote maintenance. So you might have air-gapped a system and it actually is connected somehow that you may not even be thinking about. And that connection could be a source of entry for some sort of vulnerability. So having a approach that helps your suppliers be as secure, more secure, as secure as you need them to be, is something that we've been studying here at the Sloan School. And we've seen a number of different ways that companies can actually help secure their supply chain by helping secure not just their customers, but their vendors.
Would love to go on, but I think we are close to our time. So let me first thank you for great insights, and let me stop here and thank you for being on my show. And
My pleasure.
I am hoping we're going to talk again in some time.